Okay, so now we're going to make the filling for our praline Malamars, which is like a milk chocolate praline caramel. So we need to make sure we have all of our ingredients ready to go before we start. You want to make sure you have everything scaled out. And I'm going to turn the heat on my pan, and I'm going to turn it on really, really high. And we're going to do what's called a dry caramel. So instead of adding water, I'm just going to sprinkle the sugar in the pan and let it melt and caramelize without adding any liquid. Now this is a really good method if you're doing a small amount of caramel. If I was making a large amount, I likely wouldn't do this. Although it's faster, it's a little bit more challenging. So I want to make sure I have my sugar ready and my pan hot. I'm just going to sprinkle some sugar directly into the bottom of the pot. Just a thin layer. And what I'm looking for is for the sugar to start melting. So you can see it's happening right here. It's melting just a little bit. You want to have a spoon ready to go, but you don't want to stir too much. If you stir a lot, you risk crystallizing the sugar, and nobody wants that. Then it won't be usable. There we go. You can see right here how my sugar is starting to melt. I'm going to wait for it to get a little bit meltier. If I don't need to stir, I won't. And it looks like I don't. So once that first layer is melted, I'm just going to sprinkle another layer on top. I'm going to wait for that to melt. You can see right on this corner how it's starting to get a little brown. So I might give it a little bit of a swirl. Ultimately, we're looking for golden brown, but just a gentle stir. Don't go crazy. Add a little more sugar. Gentle stir. I'm just sort of moving it around so nothing's burning. If I have a hot spot on my pan, which is obviously closest to where the handle is, add a little bit more. There we go. And then as soon as it starts to get nice and golden and all the sugar looks like it's dissolved, I'm going to add my honey. So I have it ready to go. It's just in my hand right beside me. So I'm going to add the honey. And then I'm going to add my cream a little bit at a time. So every time I add cream, you want to be careful because it's going to steam a lot. Just going to add it maybe in 4 additions. Be careful if you're using a small pot, as it tends to boil over. So just make sure you don't leave it behind or ignore it. There we go. So I've got my caramel added. I'm going to add my salt. And then I'm going to turn off the heat once it's come back to a good boil. I actually never lost the boil on mine, but if yours stopped boiling for a second, then you want to make sure it comes all the way back to a boil. There we go. So it's not burnt, it's a deep amber color. It smells really caramelly, but not bitter. If you feel like maybe you've overdone it, just start again. There's no point in using burnt caramel because it's a really obvious taste. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to melt our chocolate and let this come to 45 degrees. And we're going to let our caramel cool until it's about 70 degrees. And then we're going to stir the two together. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, so our caramel has cooled to 70 degrees and our milk chocolate is about 45. I just kept this at the right temperature using the microwave. So I'm going to put the chocolate into a bowl just because I find it a bit easier than trying to deal with this little tiny container. And then I'm going to add the caramel to the chocolate a little bit at a time. Okay, so I'm going to stir in just a touch, maybe about half. I'm just going to, like we did with ganache, just little circles in the middle until it comes together and emulsifies. There we go. And now I'm just going to add the rest. So I'm going to use my spatula to make sure I get it all out of the pot. Perfect. So you can see it has sort of a nice shiny consistency to it. Excellent. Now we're going to add the butter. I'm just going to break it up a little bit just to make it easier for it to go in. We're just going to stir that in. So I can see my caramel looks really thick. I'm just going to add just a touch of cream just to thin it out a little bit. I don't want it to be runny like sauce, but this is a little bit thicker than I had wanted. So that's better. What I'm looking for is that it runs into a stream into the bowl. I don't know if you can see that okay. But not so runny that I could scoop it. So it's somewhere between scoopable and pourable. Now I'm going to add my lightly toasted hazelnuts. I'm going to stir those in. Perfect. Now I'm just going to put it into a container and put it aside for when we're ready for it. Don't put it in the fridge, just leave it at room temperature. There we go. On to the next step.